Welcome to Waiting on the Trade, a comics book club for people who can't keep up with monthly comics. I'm Matt Ledger.
I'm Patrick Fitzgerald Fleck.
And I'm Callum Smith.
This month, we're talking about the entirety of Ping Pong, the dramatic table tennis manga written and drawn by Taiyo Matsumoto. Now, in case you need a refresher, Ping Pong tells the story of Yutaka Peiko Hoshino and Makoto Smile Tsukamoto, two talented high school table tennis players with quite different approaches to the game and life. As Peiko and Smile battle their way through Japan's high school table tennis tournaments, we encounter a rich cast of allies and competitors, all of whom have one thing in common. They take ping pong quite seriously. Quite seriously.
The dramatic high and lows of
high school
ping pong, yes.
Yeah. So, Pat, we talked yesterday about whether it's Peiko or... Oh, no, we talked about whether it's Wenge or Wenge. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Wenga.
Yeah.
Wenga, that's right.
It's definitely not Wenge.
Yeah.
Sure.
No idiot would think that. No moron would say it that way.
He's not a Star Wars character. Come on.
Dash Rendar. That's his name. Cal, welcome back to the podcast.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am very happy to be here, and I'm particularly happy to be talking about this, the best comic ever created, I think.
Oh, he's coming in hot with it. I was going to call you out, but you called yourself out.
Yes. I'm massively excited to talk about it. And I think one of the things, as I was preparing for this, I realised that although I've sort of like spoken to you about this a bit, Matt, it's all been entirely through text, so I've never really had to say I've never had to like pronounce anything out loud. Yeah. And so I was reflecting yesterday that I'm deeply grateful that of the sort of 5 main characters, and even sort of like peripheral characters, they all tend to have nicknames that are significantly easier.
And I decided yesterday is like, I feel a little weird calling Wenge China, so I think I'm going to go with Kong, is what I decided.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that works too. But yes, anyway, a nice fallback, I think. Yeah.
So Cal, before we get into it, how did you come about the best comic? How did it enter your life? Fully formed card from Marvel?
Yeah. I was trying to remember this the other day, and I think it was sort of one of two ways. I think it was either through a review of the first volume, I think, on the Comics Journal's website, or it was through lots of tweets by Ritesh Babu, who's a excellent comics critic.
Very, very, very good. There is a Comics Journal review of the first volume, which I'm going to save off into my favorites for the show notes.
Nice. So it was through one of those two. It was either one of those. Like I remember sort of engaging with both just like before I read the books, and I was reflecting on the fact as well that neither of them were my first exposure to Taiyo Matsumoto as well. Sort of a few years ago now, probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I'd read an earlier work of his called Tick on Concrete, which is also excellent, but something that like I had to kind of wrap my head around a little bit, and so I was sort of slightly hesitant about getting into Ping Pong because I've not read sort of sports manga, or I hadn't read any sports manga before this, and as it turns out, it just immediately gripped me and turned out to be the best thing that I think I've ever read. So happy ending, I think.
So that's actually a question I had, and I think we've got like a good segue into it because I know that Pat is not a sports person. Cal, are you a sports person? Would you describe yourself as a sports person?
No, I like sort of doing sport, but I've got absolutely no interest in watching sport. That said, I think that sort of ping pong and other like many other kind of films, TV shows, books, comics about that center around people playing sport aren't actually about the sport, right? Like you don't I still don't think I know much about ping pong, despite having reread this obsessively, sort of for several years now. But what I do know about is, what it means to strive for perfection in something, or what it means to reach sense of enlightenment, or what it means to sort of push yourself through friendship and competition and all the rest. So I think that the ping pong itself or the table tennis is relatively peripheral.
It could be anything, right?
On.
Like,
yeah, 100%.
But I did wonder, like, do you need to be some amount of sports person to have read this? And for this question, I'm going to turn to you, Pat, the person who I think is, Pat, would you put yourself at 0% sports person or 1% sports person?
I mean, I can appreciate them philosophically. I do not have any interest in actually participating or really watching. But yeah, I mean, no, you don't need to. Sports are not important to the enjoyment of this. And in fact, like what Cal was saying, ping pong really isn't about ping pong at all. It's about the relationships primarily between Smile and Peko, and how it builds up over the course of the volume, and how they finally, I don't know, their friendship actually blossoms at the end. They actually understand each other fully. The ping pong is just incidental. That's just how they got there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I could that actually makes me think of like how I have friends in my life who are just like Magic the Gathering friends. Like that's the primary way I interact with them, and like.
Oh yes, true. The hardest of sports.
Right. I mean, it's kind of the closest thing I have, because I was a sports person for a little bit. Like I used to be really into watching like Green Bay Packers games, because it was like basically our second religion in my house. Was like American football. But I like fell off of that in college and just don't really understand it at all at this point. In the same way that I don't really understand Catholicism at this point. It's like the same thing. But I do understand competition, and I think one of, especially now, the primary lenses that I do that through is like competitive Magic the Gathering tournaments, which I haven't played one in a long time, but like I've made some pretty deep runs into a couple decent sized ones. And like it's very similar to this, and like that's also an individual sport, but you have friends or teammates that are kind of backing you up throughout the day. And so like you get close bonds kind of as you're going through the day. Like they're 8 or 9 hour days, and then some of those tournaments can be 2-day tournaments. So it's kind of cool to form those sorts of friendships as you're going through the same thing, in kind of the same way that Peko and Smile are here.
Did either of you have any pre-existing relationship with table tennis at all? Have either of you played? I was on my school's team for table tennis, which is something that I'd forgotten about until I was reading this for the first time. I wasn't massively good at it. I wasn't sort of like anywhere. I would have been skunked, to use the parlance of this book, sort of by absolutely any character in this story. But
how many years did you play?
Through to like secondary school. So oh god, I don't know, like probably about like 10 years. But then just stopped because I got into other sports instead, I suppose. But yeah. Do either of you have any particular kind of exposure or attachment to table tennis?
Just recreationally for me.
Yeah.
For fun.
So, Kat, my wife, and I play extreme table tennis sometimes, where it's basically in as long as it hits on the other person's side somewhere, whether that be the table or the floor or a wall.
That's the one you play with a bunch of plastic cups set up in a triangle, right? That's kind of...
Yeah, that's the manga we'll be reading next month, Pat. Beer Pong.
So help me, I would read that. It would be amazing.
I mean, honestly, it'd probably be good. That's the thing, is like, I was reading stuff about how this is kind of like foundational for sports manga. Mm. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because it's kind of all, like, the whole genre is here. But like, you could, again, we were talking about how ping pong is incidental. Like, you can do this with any sport as long as you have the right focus and the right artist, and they can make it look good and make compelling characters and bring like the ethos of the sports into sort of like a more philosophical mode where you can connect with it even if you're not a sports person. Like,
I mean, literally,
you
they
can make
have
beer
just
pong manga.
name a sport, and I'm almost 100% sure that there is a manga or an anime based around that sport.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, 100%. Have either of you read any other sports sort of comics or mangas? Because I think like the way that ping pong, I think, sort of contrasts to other stuff that I've read that on paper might be quite similar is super interesting. So
I haven't read it. I've watched a bunch.
is that with I've not had to pronounce
Haikyuu,
this one.
yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Haikyuu is one of the more popular ones. Yes, I've watched that one and enjoyed it immensely.
Nice.
Yeah, I
How
have,
about you,
like,
Matt?
very limited actual like sports manga or anime experience. Most of mine is like games, which is sports adjacent, I guess. Like I've got your Hikaru no Go's, which is a spoiler for when we get to recommendations. Your Yu-Gi-Ohs, of course.
I was gonna say.
But like nothing. Like most of mine again is a lot of my manga experience is like more shonen adventure-y than like shonen real lifey, if that makes sense.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
sports manga are basically shonen. When you
I mean,
boil
it's
it
all
down.
tournament arcs, right? It's all tournament
Those
arcs.
underdogs fighting
Yeah.
against those pros. It's great.
It actually
Good
gave
times.
me vibes for, and again, like this and Hikaru no Go, I haven't read in quite a long time because this was like when I was a teenager and getting Shonen Jump like via the mail. But I had like thoughts about Yu Yu Hakusho, which has like a very big tournament arc during
What
the portion of it that I
sports
was reading.
is that?
That is,
Not familiar with
demon killing.
yeah, it's basically
okay,
like
okay.
people fighting like, oh god, I don't even know how to explain it because it's been so long. But like basically like supernatural powers, people fighting in a tournament is the part that is the most famous part, I think.
Nice. Okay. I think so. Okay, no, that is interesting. So a couple of things that occurred to me there. One of them, I think it's worth flagging that Ping Pong was published like in a seinen manga magazine. So that's so seinen manga is stuff that's aimed at like basically adult men, or like that's the sort of primary audience that they've got in mind. So distinct from shonen manga, which is sort of younger boys, basically. And I think it's interesting because it's about 15-year-old kids, but it does.
Yep.
I think
Sure
like,
is.
the intensity with which it sort of like deals with that, I think, is like it does feel appropriate and rewarding for an adult audience, I think.
There are also panels where Dragon looks like he's 45.
It's one of my
yeah.
one of my favorite jokes. I mean, we'll get onto that later, I'm sure. But yeah, one of my favorite gags in the entire book is the series is when somebody sort of mentions that there's absolutely no way that he can be a high school student, and then you just get this close up on his face, looking like he wants to murder this. Whoever's just said this to him, and he's got like, just like this intense sort of chiseled veiny head. It's lovely. But sorry, yeah. After I read sort of Ping Pong and had the time of my life, I checked out some of the sports mangas sort of on the back of this, and some of the stuff that was really interesting to me about that was, of the ones that I read, I found that most of them were sort of like relatively accessible to people coming into the sport who might need to like learn about the sport. So like there would typically be a lot of like explanations about these are all the different rules of the sport. These are the different positions. These are the different kind of maneuvers and counter maneuvers that you might do. And I think it's super interesting in ping pong. There's nobody that sort of comes in and kind of like holds your hand and explains things. Like occasionally you get sort of tiny footnotes at the bottom of the page, sort of telling you what it means to have longer pips on a table tennis racket. But otherwise, there's no concessions to the reader at all.
And there's no page where it's like, here's the rules of ping pong, which is like a thing that I have read more like sports, like American comics, and there's usually a page in there that's like, this is how it works. Like I read one about roller derby, and there's like a page of like, these are the rules. And I think even in Dragon Hoops, which is about basketball, another recommendation spoiler, there's a page of like, this is the history of basketball and how basketball works. Like,
I mean, usually in other sports anime that I've watched, it's usually didactically explained via like a novice or like a new manager is being added to the team and they don't know how the game works, so they got to explain. Like, look how that was a really cool shot. And like, oh, you don't understand how cool that shot was. Let me explain.
So I was thinking about that actually in relation to this, and I think part of it is that we get some of the very technical details, like Cal was talking about, like the pips and like the ball weight and stuff. But like other than that, ping pong is such a universal game that you just don't need it, is maybe the reason. I don't know. And also,
I felt like I could use a little bit more than what they gave me.
Okay.
Part of the reason that I enjoy sports anime so much is that I like the feeling of, oh my god, that move that they just pulled out is impossible. How are we ever going to counter it? Oh, this one kid has been practicing for hundreds of hours to do this one move that he can only do maybe one time out of 30, and he freaking does it it's like, that wasn't here, or at least it was, but we didn't fully understand the weight of what was going on because it was just silent panels of these really intense moves going back and forth, which served its purpose in here, but I guess you don't get the same, you aren't living it quite as intensely as you do in some other stories.
Maybe specifically, right? Like I was thinking, I think the closest you get to that, Pat, is when Peiko does his like, look at my blazing moves bit.
Yeah.
In the end.
I love that bit. I love that bit so much.
It's really good, right? But like, I think that's the closest thing to like, basically, I mean, kind of what you're looking for, Pat, is like Goku doing a spirit bomb and like someone explaining like, oh, this is so cool. Like, yeah. And like, it's not quite in there. I agree with you on that.
But like they go over like the fact that Smile his chops are really good. They never fully
explain what a chop is.
You sort of understand what it is, but they never like blatantly say chopping is a more defensive style than it is than an attacker who is much more aggressive, which you get through the story and like the characterization of the characters themselves. But yeah, they don't.
They definitely don't want for you.
I don't want an information page like you were talking about, Matt, but I could use maybe a little kid,
something in the middle, right?
Going up to Granny and saying, "What's going on?" And Granny's like, oh, "Okay, let me explain." Just some, I don't know.
I think there's maybe a couple of things in that as well. I think one of them, sort of like having read now, sort of like as much Taiyo Matsumoto stuff in English as there is available. He's not somebody that seems particularly interested in over-explaining stuff. Like, and I think you get this sort of through the characterization in these in the sort of 2 volumes of Ping Pong as well. That he's sort of incredibly sort of minimalist with his approach to sort of dialogue, and is entirely fine sort of leaving some things kind of hinted at, or just for the audience to sort of do the work themselves to like sort of put pieces together. So I think that's part of it. I think it might have been sort of contrary to his approach to stuff to sort of have that kind of that outsider coming in who needed things explained to them. But the other bit as well, I suspect, is that I think Ping Pong, like the focus of this is on character and on like growth.
Absolutely, the sport is
not about the sport; it's about the people.
Right.
Yeah. And then Matsumoto himself, I think it's in the afterwords to volume 2. I'm pretty sure this is where I read this, where he's talking about the fact that sort of ping pong or table tennis as a sport was kind of picked because he sort of thought of another couple of sports, including sort of football or soccer, which is like that's his sort of big sport, like personal sporting passion. But he didn't want to draw
so many people,
like 22 people on the pitch.
That.
Yeah. And so sort of picking out ping pong is, I guess, like it makes loads of sense because it's just 2 people at a time, and sort of lots of intense and sort of clear binary outcomes to matches that sort of are a good vehicle for growth in that sense, because it's all sort of quite decisive what's happening in any given conflict. So anyway, so that might be why there's not some of the hand holding there, I think, or hand holding maybe sounds too derisive, but like there's not that kind of like explanation or sort of like granular sort of like laying out of exactly what it means to be an attacker or a chopper or or long pips, short pips, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, we get so many talks about like whether the pips are long or short, and I didn't even reading it, I was like, I don't understand why this like matters exactly, but I don't think it matters that much that I don't understand. So I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Having looked into it myself, my understanding is long pips harder to control, but you're able to put much more spin on the ball. Shorter pips, easier, more straightforward, but you've got slightly less opportunity to sort of put spin or sort of do something unexpected with the ball.
Yeah, and I think it's actually unfair of me to point that specifically out because I think they do explain that when they're giving Smile the longer
I think
pitch.
it's more just to indicate that the level of game that the kids are playing has gone to the point where that kind of minutia actually makes a difference to them.
Yeah,
and the ball weight too.
Yeah.
Is this a good time to bring up that I think this is the first time in the podcast history that more than one book is being discussed
at once? Yeah, I mean, we probably should talk about that.
Because I think I was delighted because I think I love the first volume, but the second volume, like particularly the back half of the second volume, is just non-stop. I don't know. Just
and I was doing my notes, I felt like so weird because so much of my stuff was coming from the back half, and I was like, I've got to find something to talk about in the first volume, as though we're not going to talk about it for 2 hours regardless. But yeah, I definitely noticed, like, as I was pulling my notes together, I was pulling stuff more and more from the back half, and especially the Peiko and Dragon match, more than the front for sure.
Is it? I suppose it like linked into that because I do think like it all flows together as like one big story really well and comes to a massively satisfying conclusion. But is it worth kind of just running through the different characters?
Sure.
Yeah, I guess before we do that, quick.
Yeah.
Just like I think when you were like, "Hey, we should read Ping Pong," I was like, "Yeah, we should just do the whole thing." And I knew that's what you meant too because. Yeah. I think it would do such a disservice to split it in half. Like, I think if we talked about one volume, we'd end up talking about volume 2 anyways. Yeah. We may as well just do the whole thing. So that's why this special dispensation was made. We're never doing it again, Cal. Never do this again. But yeah, I think if we talked about the first half of it, we'd lose so much because it does come around. It is like such a complete story, and everyone gets their full arc by the end.
And chapter 49 is in the second volume as well.
49, man. Yeah, I was actually going to ask you guys next, like which characters like stood out as your favorites, but maybe that'll just end up with us talking about all of them anyways. So we've got basically our 5 primary characters, and then kind of our ancillary characters from there, right?
Mm-hmm. So we've got Smile and Pico, who we've already sort of mentioned, who are the sort of 2 sort of outsider kids, basically, I would say, who are sort of childhood friends, both obsessed with ping pong but in different ways. Peko, sort of very exuberant, sort of hyperactive, massively talented, but like. Certainly at the start of the book, unable to kind of focus his talent or sort of apply himself into kind of growth, I suppose. Smile, who has a ironic nickname, which is because he's sort of perceived as being sort of slightly robotic and cold and emotionless, although I think throughout the story you see that he is sort of probably cripplingly empathetic instead, I would say. Sort of really good table tennis, but in a different way to Pico, less flamboyant, perhaps. And then China, or Kong, who you mentioned before, who's a Chinese player who's sort of arrived in Japan in sort of slight disgrace, having lost, I think, a couple of matches, maybe in China, and he's sort of in Japan as not a punishment, but kind of like a purgatory to sort of try and redeem himself by rising to the top of the Japanese leagues. And then the final 2 is Dragon and Demon, who are both sort of players for Neptune Academy, which is a sort of seemingly sort of prestigious school that puts a lot of effort into its table tennis program, to the extent that all of the players there shave their heads completely, which makes them look absolutely terrifying, and also a bit like table tennis balls.
Those veins.
Yeah. And of the two of them, Demon is I don't know if you not a childhood friend necessarily, but a childhood peer of Pico and Smile, who has since moved to Neptune Academy and is just sort of playing at a certain level through just relentless, kind of crushing hard work. And Dragon, who is the sort of captain of the Neptune Academy team, who is the character that looks like he might be about 45, and is this just kind of sort of terrifying, powerful, I don't know, sort of table tennis presence, who is, I don't know, maybe, again, sort of in a different way, sort of being slightly crushed and strangled by the pressure that he's placing on himself to remain at the top. So I think that, like, does that feel like a fair summary of the sort of main 5 characters?
I always like having you on the podcast, Cal, because you just do my work for me. It's great. Yeah, that seems like a really good summary of the 5. The line that stood out for me regarding Dragon was, I think it's Granny near the end, who says like all table tennis must be agony for him. Just like he's just like putting himself through the paces, and like every single game he's just like, I must not lose, I must be great, because otherwise like what am I doing here? And also all of these people are beneath me, so like I can't lose because that would make me less than. Which makes his game against Peiko, where he knows he's going to lose and is still just like having a blast, kind of really good.
It's so good. It's so good.
But I think before we get into that, because I feel like we're going to spend so much time on like specifically that match, I want to talk about how Demon might be my favorite character in the manga.
Yeah, I agree.
So I really empathize with him in a way that I don't empathize as much with the other characters, because I feel like throughout the whole thing he's just trying to like bash his head into the wall that is being great at ping pong, and like he's doing really well, right? Like he's very good. He could beat the pants off of probably you when you were playing, Cal.
Well, and I think it's notable that he absolutely dismantles Pico right at the end of the first volume, which is like, that's not nothing at all.
But just like realizes playing against Smile that he's never gonna be great, right? Like because he's training literally as hard as he can, and the best he can do is losing to Smile. And for some reason, none of these people ever chalk up losses to being a bad day or bad luck or whatever. But that's fine. That's a completely different discussion, which we might have later. But like, and then watching him like figure out what he's gonna do with his life, and then accepting the fact that he kind of needs to move on because this just isn't going to be for him. Like, I think I wrote in my notes, like, as a person who needs to get back to the 3rd draft of their novel and is spending hours walking their dog instead, like the amount of effort and sacrifice he put in to getting as good as he did get, and then to basically just be like, I have to hang it up because I can't go any higher. Like, that's crushing, man. Like, that was like, I think that's probably the hardest hitting arc for me in the whole book.
It's I mean, one of my favorite bits from the first volume is the the brutality. So after sort of Smile has destroyed Demon in a game where, you know, it was stated beforehand, like the stakes are like if Demon loses, then he has to.
He basically is quitting ping pong.
Yeah. And Demon sort of, you know, breaking down, or like just like sort of raging against the, I don't know, the ease with which Smile is beating him. And it's on page 483 where sort of Smile is just kind of readjusting his glasses, and like, I think it's blunt. It's not intended to be, you know, sort of cutting, but it just sort of tells him that he's losing because he's got no natural talent.
No natural talent for table tennis. Yeah.
And it is absolutely devastating. It's just, it's, yeah. I think that's a real standout of the first volume for me, I think. And then on the next page, just you get this sort of like full length image of Demon kind of processing that, I think, which is, I don't know, it's left a mark, I think, on me reading that.
Yeah, and then where Smile's like, that's it. No need to yell about it. As though like Damon hasn't spent his entire life trying to get good at this sport that Smile's just like effortlessly crushing him at.
Yeah.
No need to be mad, man. Like, and that's so weird too, because Smile is like, we talked about how Smile is weirdly the most empathetic character in the volume, like willing to throw games against people. Okay, go ahead, Pat.
I don't. He's empathetic towards Peiko. He likes like his one friend that he's the whole reason why he's in the sport to begin with. That's the person he's empathetic for. I don't think he cares about anyone else.
He throws the game against Kong too.
Yeah, because he knows what it will mean for Kong to lose to him at that point.
All right.
And so by the time we get to Demon, he's basically made the full run of like, okay, I'm just gonna stop doing this because it's not the thing I'm doing anymore. And I'm not gonna just throw games against people.
The arc of Smile, I really, really love because like particularly his relationship with the coach that kind of takes him on with the express intention of turning Smile into a monster, and then I think you watch what that means for sort of Smile and the people around him, and like I found it really effective because he's able to then, or he makes the decision to kind of shut off the part of him that can't bear to crush or disappoint other people. And then as soon as that's not there, and he's sort of takes down Demon, and then is like in the second volume is sort of just effortlessly sort of proceeding through the tournament until sort of Peiko is ready to take him on, I suppose.
And the other day we see we see one of Smile's games in the second tournament, right? But that's it.
In full, yes, against the other Neptune Academy player, the one with the big fuzzy eyebrows, who I can't remember.
Who shows up?
He must have a name, but I love that match as well. And there's a nice thing that you see sort of quite a few times, I think, in matches with Smile, where players will initially sort of be overestimating him or sort of underestimating him, or sort of believing that they're getting a foothold, and then it's sort of revealed that Smile is just sort of waiting, but just sort of analysing their playstyle and analysing their weaknesses, and then is able just to sort of flick a switch and sort of dismantle them without any sort of seeming effort.
Oh yeah, that's the guy where he's like, I just have to hit it in the middle and I can take care of him, right? Yeah.
Which I love. You see, it's in the first volume, I think, right? The one where another player comes in sort of feeling incredibly sort of like confident and arrogant, and then sort of throughout the course of the match you see them just switch from being like sure that they're going to sort of defeat Smile to sort of planning, well, maybe I'll just go to the beach after this.
Yeah, that's the guy. I was like, that's one of the bits that made me think of Magic tournaments where you're like on the bubble and you're like one more loss away from like the days, like you don't play the rest of the day because it's not worth it. You can't make it to day 2. And so like you're in the middle of the game and you're like, fuck it, this one's gone. And you're like, I should do it the rest of the day. Go get like a sandwich after this. It'll be fine.
How did you both feel about Demon in the second volume after he's sort of renounced table tennis, but is still kind of haunting the book a little bit?
Yeah, he's still like around, right? Like he's basically the catalyst for Peiko to become Peiko.
I mean, he literally saves him from 3 feet of water, whatever Peiko is drowning in, in the shallows of the ocean.
Yeah,
I agree with Matt. I think Demon is my favorite character out of all of them. I like that his life he's started to move beyond ping pong at that point. I mean, obviously he still has baggage and has to go to talk to Dragon about why Dragon does what he does or how he's gotten to where he is. And he's
that conversation's so good to
absolutely destroyed when he finds out he's just doing it for himself and that.
It's a solo sport, man.
Well, I mean,
come on.
Well, that's sort of what my problem was with the characters in this. I don't really like most of them. I enjoyed Peiko is so annoying for the majority of this book until you actually get towards the end where he's actually like, maturing and actually enjoying the sport for the sake of the sport as opposed to showing off. That's when I start to appreciate Peko. But up until that point, holy God, so annoying.
I like him from the start. He reminds me. I don't know. There's something that's just that I personally sort of often find myself charmed by with somebody that's just. I don't know. Like even when like he's 100% arrogant, overconfident, sort of blinkered in his worldview. But I still really appreciate that he's as passionate about the ingredients of the different sort of like horrible sugary sort of snacks that he's on all the time. And like there's stuff like that, and like his relationship with Grandma, the sort of owner of the table tennis club that he goes to. I really like that as well. I think that's tender and fun, like right from the offset. I think it develops and matures all the way through, but. And then yeah, but so sorry. This is me saying that Peko I think is my favourite character in it. I think because of the journey that he goes on, he does start off abrasive, but I think that never kind of distanced me from him. So maybe that was made it easier for me to get in there. And because he saves Smile from bullies. When they're little kids, he's a good egg. He's a good.
I'm not saying like he's
arrogant
a
egg,
bad person. I just find him freaking annoying.
Yeah, I mean, get vibes.
Yeah. I mean,
Call me Mr. Peko.
Yes.
You'll be ready to take me on in about 300 years.
Yes, I like it.
I think, Pat.
He had really hard Naruto believe it vibes in the beginning, and I was not vibing with that.
Yeah, I do appreciate sort of how early in the story he's like the humiliation of Peko starts as well, because it's pretty early doors when he plays Pong for the first time in that kind of like informal match when Kong's just arrived and he's unable to score a single point on him, and it's I also like that kind of like beating Peko so easily is just kind of like driving Kong's despair as well.
Yeah,
like,
he's just like, oh god, this fucking place.
This country's worthless.
This person's good here.
yeah. I love it. Kong isn't my favorite character, but I really like sort of doing the rereads for this. Like, I really appreciated something that I guess I don't know if I'd missed it or I'd forgotten it, but like I really appreciate that like by the second volume when you see him again. He's just like a different person from the first volume, and like he's like it's kind of specified that he's sort of taking on a leadership role within his own club at this point, and sort of like actually invested in sort of developing the other players around him.
I think Kong is my second favorite.
He's like reverse dragoning, actually, in a way, right? Where like we hear dragons say like, "I just play for myself," like ping pong is ping pong to me, and like it's kind of holy and I need to be very good at it because otherwise what am I? Whereas Kong's like, I'll just like, I'm part of this team now and I'm training them and like we're all getting
he stuck around after losing for the rest of the team, which is I think part of the reason why I struggled to like the characters in this is because comparing it to other sports anime that I've watched, especially like Haikyuu and the like, it is very the team is a huge aspect of those stories, that it's not just like there's always some like savant or like perfect player, but that player is going through some like drama or they sprained a leg or something, but it's the team that like holds them up, and that is the stuff that I really get into. And there really isn't that much like throughout the entirety of this, both Smile and Peko are entirely dismissive of the rest of their team. Like their coach
Pat. They all suck.
Are they? They're just high school students. I didn't like that. I didn't like how they were treating the average players. I'm just like, come on.
There's one bit in this, right, where it's actually like a team tournament or whatever, and like it's back and forth elimination matches, and basically they put Smile last so he can play all four of the other team's players in 6 seconds. Like I understand that. I think to agree with you, Pat, about like no one cares about the rest of the players.
That's not what this story was, and I understand that, but it also made this was all about the egos, about the huge egos of all the star players, and how good their talents were. And I mean, of course, the sport itself doesn't let it. There isn't a team in table tennis.
Or to be more charitable about it, it's a singular character piece, and it's just a different thing.
But like, I don't know. But I think that's why, just because there wasn't the support, Smile didn't really help train up the other guys. You just dismissed them as not having the talent to be bothered with. And plus, that one dude's hair was crazy. Him, right? So I mean, my God. But yeah, I don't know. I liked China because at the end he was looking beyond himself, which made me like him.
100% on board with that. Just with the thing to kind of add to it, that I think it is sort of part of the text of the story as well. But like, I think that the growth for every single character in the story is about kind of like moving past ego, like an individualistic sense of like who they are and how they fit into.
I should like the very end where they flash forward. 6 years.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I like these people. Like, Smile. There's like, oh, he's a human. He's a person who cares about others and just wants kids to have fun with table tennis.
And like Dragon is like swinging by this small club and is at peace, I suppose, with like his part of like the community. And I think even sport, and I think the thing that like I really love so much about kind of Pekko's arc through the whole story is that you see the in contrast with Smile and Dragon in particular, you see the effect that he has on like the positive effect that he has on people all around him. So I think you're kind of seeing that like once he's able to like go through this kind of like ego death moment where he I don't think he is trying to kill himself, but jumps off a bridge and then is in real trouble. Like from that point onwards, which is I think when he has kind of like relinquished a previous sense of self that like was like bound up in kind of like arrogance and selfishness, he's consciously or unconsciously kind of like improving everybody around him. And I really love that. Like he's improving sort of like Grandma and her son, who's the sort of the people coaching him. Like they're getting something out of their relationship with Pico because he's got this infectious love, like this natural just like love and enthusiasm for the sport. And then when he beats Kong in the sort of final tournament, like Kong is happy to have sort of like lost in the kind of match that he did against Pekka. And then obviously like this sort of comes out entirely in the match with Dragon as well, where you can see again, like he's fixing people through the way that he's playing, which is now more of kind of like just a generous thing, which is about like, let's play the best game that we possibly can. And then I think through doing that with Smile as well, like although you don't see everything in that match, I think he's saved Smile from the path that he's on as well by having this kind of like entirely like joyous, unselfish approach to playing the sport. And like with regards to like the rest of the team, like I mean, it's a tiny moment. So like it probably like won't fully scratch the itch that you're talking about there, Pat. But like there's a nice moment kind of like midway through his final match with Dragon, where the captain with the kind of fun hair from their team sort of like wishes Pico luck, and he's able to kind of just like respond in like a relaxed, sort of generous way. When's this? It's on page 367 in the second volume, and I think it's again, just sort of like indicative of the fact that like the growth of Pico, and then therefore kind of like everybody else through the story is about sort of like loving the sport and like loving the way that everybody is able to like lift each other up and not have this kind of like zero-sum approach to growth. So I think that's why there's something that I still get from like looking at stories about teams and about like communities that I still get from this, although like on the surface I think it is like this incredibly like everybody's out for themselves. I think like the message or like the ideas that it's kind of dealing with ultimately kind of go against that, which is something that I really loved sort of particularly kind of going through the rereads for this.
Yeah, I think Ping Pong gets there at the end. I think it's what it's building up to, as opposed to other sports manga or anime where it's the camaraderie and team spirit is like the cornerstone of the entire story.
Yes, yeah. Whereas in this, it's like the revelation that that's possible, as opposed to like the starting premise. Yeah. No, I think that's fair.
What did you guys think about Butterfly Joe's relationship with Smile?
I loved it. It's really weird.
Yeah, I mean, same. I think, I mean, it's another like highlight of the first volume for me, I think. So, Butterfly Joe, who's this kind of older coach who kind of reveals himself to have, I suppose, like as a younger man, to have had the kind of talent that Smile and Pico had, and to have had a situation that was like remarkably similar to them. I think where he had, a friendship with another sort of young table tennis player, and through holding back himself, he felt as though he ultimately kind of stunted both of their growths. And I don't know, the bitterness of that maybe seems to have. I'm not saying he's like mad or like insane in the future, but he is. I don't know, eccentric or just like fixated on Smile going down a different path that, like, I don't know, results in a lot of eccentricities, particularly in that match where he's sort of like boasting about how he's going to get Smile to be his little dog and bark for him and all this kind of stuff.
Bark for me?
Yeah.
I mean, even before that, he's always like, we're going to go on a date.
Yeah.
I'm in love with you.
Yeah.
I'm too old
he's
for.
Just bored. He wants something. He wants something exciting to be happening in his life, and here's
a little weird.
This fresh little young man with all this skill.
Yeah.
When I
got what they're going for. Like, it's the nostalgia. Like he sees himself and like what he could be, and he's living vicariously through Smile for sure.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything kind of salacious to it.
No, I don't think so.
When I say it's like inappropriate, there's nothing like. I don't think there's anything sort of like sexual or anything like that. But I think it's inappropriate in the sense that he says, "I want to make this guy into a monster," and then like goes about it.
He's using
like he's like well on course to managing that, to like just making Smile into this sort of terrifying ping pong machine.
To the point where the like climactic match of the book is basically Smile saying, "Please stop this, Pico."
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So no, I mean, like, for that reason, like, I really like Butterfly Joe. I really like how just sort of like weird and awkward he is. Like, even in I think it's in the second volume where he's doing something ostensibly to try and like get Smile to like relax before a match, and he's like, "Oh, I've got a riddle for you," and it's just like just completely misreading exactly the kind of stuff that Smile is going to be into.
Smile would actually need.
Yeah. I enjoyed that, and I also like that when Joe sees Pecco kind of like playing at his peak against, I'm sure it's against Dragon, and then against Smile right at the end. That Joe gets it as well, and that he's he's able to, in my reading of it, kind of like let go of like whatever trauma it is that he's still carrying from his youth as well, and like the sense of like missed opportunities.
Yeah, I mean the back half of this book, or at least let's just say the back half, is so much about being able to achieve the mindset of like, it doesn't matter whether you're the best, you just want to play good games. And like every character learning that in succession as Peiko interacts with them, like you were saying, Cal, like from Kong to Dragon to Coach to, I think Smile already knows it, but for some reason is just like, I'm just going hard now.
I think he needs Peiko to know to do it as well, right? Like, I think that's the thing that I love about the final match between those two, is that like they are saving each other at exactly the same time. Like, sort of Smile needs to be sort of taken off the path that he's on. He needs, but to do that, he needs Peiko to be to
step
be the
up
hero,
and actually
right?
like be as good as he can be. Yeah.
Oh god, it's so good. It's so good. I'm just looking at it now, and I suppose, I mean, is this a good time to sort of talk about like how this book looks? Because I think it's like a big part of it, right? Like it's got certainly within manga a relatively unusual aesthetic, but like
It's very loose, and like in my notes, I made comparison to a lot of the comics I would see when I was living in South Korea. Like those were a lot looser like this. Like this very much reminded me of that when I first opened it up, to the point where I was like, I wonder, like I didn't research into it as much as I maybe should have. But I was like, I wonder what's going on with this, because like it's so much.
I can tell you if you like.
Okay, go for it.
I've done some research on this.
Cal, do my work for me.
Matsumoto spent a good amount of time in France when he was sort of just around the time that he was becoming interested in drawing comics, and so like he sort of primarily cites kind of like French artists as sort of like being particularly large like influences on him artistically. So I don't know if you guys have read much by Mobius.
I was gonna say, are we talking Mobius? Because like now that you
of course
say
you
it,
are.
like
Of course
there's
you
a
are.
hell of a lot of Mobius in here.
Yeah. And so I think it is this sort of like unusual blending of kind of like European and sort of Japanese art, and sort of ending up looking like you can sort of like identify different elements from each, but it looks entirely unique. I think like there's a common thing that I've kind of like seen online or in like conversations with people that are coming to like stuff drawn by Matsumoto for the first time, is that there's this initial sense that it looks ugly, and I think it's a really interesting one. Like I remember having it myself as well. I think it's partly because like it is like the line work is really loose. It's like there's no sense of kind of like clean perfection in the way that, you know, like particularly like with manga, lots of it like looks so sort of like crisp and
Yeah, so much of it is to me is like angles and very crisp inks and like just like straight lines, and this is not that.
No,
in a lot of cases.
As a fan of Frank Quitely, I was okay with it.
Yeah, well, I think Frank Quitely is a really, really good comparison as well. And I think there's this concept that kind of like that sort of like came about in like the sort of like 1970s in Japan, which is this term called again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, but heta uma, which is sort of like roughly translates to like bad but good, or like unskilled but skilled. And I think it is this idea of like it sometimes like to do something that just like feels loose and is really expressionistic. Like at first glance, it doesn't feel quite right because it's not sort of like directly representational art. It's not like, although I think that there's like lots of like photo reference stuff used in Ping Pong, like even stuff there, like it looks. The way that it's been drawn, it looks sort of slightly unreal and just like really expressionistic in a way that I think is sometimes slightly off-putting for people, but I think is part of why, I don't know, this book just like looks like nothing else. And that's kind of like before you even get onto like, you know, sort of page compositions and like the angles in which stuff is done. And like I think it's really interesting as well that like Ping Pong is the sport that was picked for this, because it's, as sports go, it's something where there are just like incredibly repetitive motions, right? Like matches are two people who just stood on opposite sides of the same table doing effectively the same motion again
and again, over and over and over. Yeah,
but like, although there's so many matches throughout the series, but like none of them, like nothing ever feels like boring or repetitive, and it feels like the impression that I get from reading Ping Pong. I think one of the things I love about it so much is that it feels like it's drawn by somebody that like is having the time of their life drawing this. And like
there's so many weird experiments throughout this is part of what part of what I took it. There's so many pages or panels where it's just like, I wonder what this would look like. I'm gonna try this. And like one of the ones that comes to mind immediately is the page during goddamn chapter 49. Maybe we'll just talk about all of chapter 49 right now, because there's so many of these in that chapter. But the one that came to mind first was the page where you're basically doing the ball's eye view as the ball like goes across. I think it's from Dragon to Peiko, and the ball is traveling, and then Peiko's paddle is there to catch it at the end. Like it's basically the Tom Taylor like first person Nightwing perspective issue, but like in one page, and also what, 25 years earlier or whatever. This is 1999, right? Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a very cool page. There's some panels in even that chapter that don't work for me. There's one panel that I think just like didn't get inked, and it's very loose, and like I see what it's
it feels
going
like
for,
pencils. Is this the one with like Dragon's face?
yeah, it's of Dragon, and I think he's swinging his
I
paddle,
love it.
and like it's
page
all
page
pencils.
390. I love it. I love it so much.
I didn't like it, but like again, I appreciate the attempt. Like I appreciate going for it, and the book sure does fucking go for it. We took our explicit tag off the other week, and whatever, it's fine. Like you're not wrong in that the book is just it's doing its thing, and I think nowhere more than that page or that chapter where Peiko and Dragon are playing in basically silence except for the sound effects.
Yeah.
You're saying you didn't like the sketchy one? Come on, man.
I love it.
I didn't like it.
It's the
If you
intensity,
guys like
Matthew.
it, that's fine.
Yeah.
It's
I'm
the
so glad you guys
emotion.
like it.
And like speed, like I don't think I've seen like speed and impact represented through static images this well, like anywhere else. Like I've not seen anything close to it. So it's like on page 390 and 391, like the amount of information and like just the amount of information that's like packed into like what must be like a second, like a second of real time as the characters are experiencing it. But like the way that they convey, so you've got like Pico at the top, identifying where he's going to hit the ball. Dragon.
That
the
panel
next
is
second,
so fucking good, by the way. The panel where Peiko's like, that's the spot, the corner of the table, and there's just like a little circle that like identifies it, like that's where he's looking and that's where he's going. That panel, very good.
I love it, and I love that like just below that as well, like Dragon spots it and like identifies. Oh god, it's so good.
And then the sketchy is him desperately trying to get there to get to the ball. Matt, you're wrong. You are incorrect, sir.
I'm being wrong, and again, like I really appreciate the experiment and the going for it. Like I don't think it's wrong for the panel to be there. It didn't work for me overall.
Matt, we're not going to finish this recording until you until you love this panel. What about on page 341 where you've got this like some of the most like expression? Oh no, not the most. I'll find the page for that. But like 341 where you've got this is at the point where Dragon is like dominating
that
the
one.
match.
I'm like almost into. I'm so close to being into
and it's
that.
Like, I'm like superhuman the speed with which he's just able to get exactly where Pico's hit the ball. There's another one as well where like he's just like he's like barely. It's barely like a human figure. There's one where
his arm
like
is
a
like
blob.
Yeah.
Where is it? And then actually I'll tell you what. The one that'll be easier for me to find is the point at which everything kind of clicks into place for Pico and like the second game of that match, and Pico is just sort of like almost like warping to like where Dragon is hitting the ball, and I'm just desperately trying to find this because I love it. I love it. Where are we? Oh, there we've got Dragon's arm being an actual dragon. That's
good. I was going to call that one out. That one's good.
It's incredibly metal in all the ways that I love. I love it so much. Where am I? I really want to see this. Dragon just being this like sort of like terrifying kind of like grinning warp. Oh, okay. I'd say. Okay,
I know exactly which page you're talking about. And I have it in my notes. But my notes are so long.
You get the Pico version of it on 380. I hope this is good audio for anybody that's listening to this.
It'll be fine.
Read along. Get these books.
I know exactly which panel you're talking about because I'm looking at 380 now, and I'm like, "Yep, that's what I'm looking for." But Dragon's doing it instead.
Yeah. and you can see this like pained smile on his face as he does it. God, Dragon's face.
It's during the bit where he's telling his teammates to stop interrupting.
Stop shouting for him.
Yeah. He's like, "Hey, I'm busy here." It's page 419.
Nice. Everyone, quick. Nice. So is it at the point at which they're both like enjoying it? Oh, God, that's even better. If that's when.
Yeah, he's just happens. Like he's so fucking rapturous that he's got this like Joker grin on page 419. He looks like a literal fucking dragon going back towards the table. Oh, it's so good. That fucking match is so good.
It's like I will often, there are like pieces of art that like I will read like if I just need like a little pick me up, or if I need just like get my head in the right space, and the like just the back half of volume 2 of Ping Pong is, I think, for the last few years has been the thing that I return to most frequently, because any time I just need to like just sort of get to a place where I want to like push myself and I want to excel and I want to do it in a way that is like finding the joy in what I'm doing. So it's not, sort of fighting against something. It's like working out, I suppose, like, sort of in the language of this book, like working out how to like revel in whatever I'm finding challenging at that time. And like the effect that the back half of this book has on me every single time, like even I tend to like reread the whole thing, but I can just there's a cluster of chapters at the end that I can reread, and it is the equivalent of, I don't know, I don't know what it's the equivalent of doing, like drinking like 5 Red Bulls or something like that. I don't know. Like
that's what sports, manga, and anime do. They get you amped. They get you pumped, man.
Yeah, and this just, I don't know. Like,
Peiko going warp speed is on page 380.
Yeah.
That is, it's so good, isn't it? Like the moment, like even just kind of like the run up to that, like it's so well constructed with the. I love everything in the run up to it, with sort of Peiko's like knee just sort of like starting to give, and you've seen him push himself to some kind of like physical limit in the matches running up to this, and they've kind of seeded earlier in the series as well that like people blow out their knees and that's it. Like that's.
Yep.
You can ruin the rest of your career by like.
I mean, that's what happened to Joe, right?
Yeah,
Joe didn't want to force
exactly.
his friend to play with a broken.
Yeah, and it I don't know, just like the bit where Pico is talking to his own knee, and it sort of tells him,
"Hey, I'm fine,
like,
buddy."
Good to go. Yeah, I love it. I love it so much. And like I don't know, just like the kind of like realization like within Pico that he's got it, and that he just needs to experience joy and kind of follow that is just incredible. And like I think you kind of mentioned it before, Matt, but the bit where I think it's in his head. I don't think he's saying any of this out loud in the moment, but the point where he's sort of like telling himself like more, faster, and then launches himself in the air with watch me smile, look at my blazing moves, is just like I don't know if it's clear from like the audio here, but I'm smiling like ear to ear.
I did want to do a fist pump in the coffee shop the other day. Yeah.
It's so good. I can remember the first time that I was reading this sort of in bed next to Ruth and just starting to laugh out loud like throughout like the next 3 chapters, because it was producing a real sense of joy in me, but also just recognizing like even beyond like what the characters are going through, like this as a book was just sort of like doing stuff that I've just not seen before. Like the way that, I don't know, like the way that the art just like kicks up a gear in this last sort of like big match is, I've not seen anything like it, right? And like we read sort of like in superhero comics, like you see fights all the time, right? And like that on a basic level, it's not really that different to like, or it shouldn't be that different to like what's happening.
Yeah, you're very much
in
getting
a
a stock unit of comic book in that thing, whereas with this, you're getting like someone who, again, we were talking about page 390, like there are big swings here. Like there's experiments, and there's like, hey, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna see if it works. And I think for the like 99.9% of it does, and it's really fucking good as a result.
Yeah. Even like the on page 400, like just the bit where you see the ball kind of extending Dragon's reach, and like I don't know, just like everything across these pages, just the the way that like time is kind of like broken
the
down
time
into,
dilation's
like,
so good, right? I was just about to talk about that, like the pacing. Like I'm on 391, which I think is a really good example of comics breaking down a second of time into 10 different moments within that second. And so you look at the page and you're kind of looking at it as a whole image, and then you also can process it as the moments, like picoseconds or whatever. And then the next page is 2 panels. The page after that is that, like I was saying, like first person view from the ball's perspective, which is also very slow. Like both of those pages are very slow. And then like the pace is kind of slowing down, speeds up for just a second, and then you get that splash page where Peiko's just jumping in the air and gonna smash that.
God, it's so cool. It's so good. And then another thing, like I love like the sound effects lettering in this, and like occasionally that sticks out to me. And like Pat, it was I'm really glad that you brought up Frank Quitely, because I think like this feels like the type of thing that you would see in his work where, yeah, like sound effects lettering is like a big part of it as well. And, like the pack on page 399, just after sort of Pico is like, yeah, I don't know, just like absolutely pile drive this ball back towards Dragon is, I love it so much. Oh god, it's so good. Like everything, I do get really enthusiastic about stuff that I read and that I love, but like there is nothing that makes me just sort of like cackle whilst I'm thinking about it in the way that Ping Pong does. It is, I don't know, yeah, it's just the absolute best, I think, in terms of the things that I'm looking for, which is like, is it technically interesting? Yes. Is it technically like achieving something really interesting? 100%. Is it like producing a strong emotional reaction in me? Yes, 100%.
Yes.
Is it like
Yes.
really like, is it like really like thoughtful as well? Because I think it's like really interesting. Like I was reading a like an essay the other day that was about like the effectiveness of ping pong as a kind of like lens into like Buddhist philosophy about like, you know, sort of like letting go of material concerns and like all this kind of stuff. And I don't know enough about Buddhism to know how sort of like to like really sort of like critically comment on that essay, but it was really interesting, and it felt very compelling to me as I was reading it. And I really love that, like, for such a straightforward, simple story, that it will support really wide-ranging kind of like analysis and ideas and, you know, theories and readings of it as well. I think that's like a really, for me, that's like something that I love in art as well, right? Like where I've absolutely no idea whether or not Matsumoto had that in mind as he was writing it, but like I loved that this person writing this essay had this really clear, powerful analysis or like, you know, understanding of the text that they were bringing to it as well. And like, yeah, it's just genuinely pretty flawless, I think.
I don't know. There's that panel on page 3.
Boom, are you wrong?
Matt, what did you think of the panel on page 365 where Dragon is suddenly like 12 feet tall, shouting at Pico across? Oh god, man! I tell you what, like I love this one a week again.
Oh,
not
that's
just
fun.
because Dragon
That's
is.
fun.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I also just like love Pico's response to that as well. Like just getting like this objectively terrifying man, you know, sort of like shouting at him from across the table, and his response is just like, I love you. It's just,
which again is that complete transformation from like, I'm here to be the best, to be like, hey, I just want to play ping pong, man. Let's just play. Get over it.
Yeah.
Well, that reminds me. Oh crap! What was the insult that?
Oh, ragamuffin?
Ragamuffin.
Yes,
I desperately want to know what that is a translation of. Because there's no way that's actually ragamuffin in Japanese.
Maybe we can get the translator on the horn. I'll see if I fire off an email before we post.
This is like a country bumpkin. Like, what did he call him? I want to know. Ragamuffin.
It's yeah. Oh god, I love it. I love it so much. The translation of this was done by what was the name? David Arias? Is that how I'm going to suggest that this is pronounced? It might be. But
sounds good to me.
They were Michael Arias. They are also a director, an animation director, and directed the adaptation of Tekkon Kinkreet, Taiyo Matsumoto's other kind of like really big famous work. So like, just nice, I think, that they clearly have like such a love for his work that they, you know, so really crossed disciplines.
Yeah, it's awesome. I've also heard really good things about the ping pong, the animation. Like I hear it's pretty good.
I've started watching it in preparation for this episode. I haven't finished it yet, but it's really good. I'm really enjoying it. But it's a really interesting adaptation as well, I think, in that. So one of the things I love about ping pong is that it is so unbelievably just like propulsive. Like it is there is there's no fat on it at all. It is just like going like and like it's basically just matches. Occasionally you see people training, but like
Yeah, outside of
like
like a couple training montage chapters or whatever, like it's
Yeah.
basically just people playing ping pong.
and you sort of you get kind of hints about people's home lives or like lack of home lives,
Sure.
but like that's about it. And like the anime so far seems to be sort of fleshing out quite a lot there. So like you get more rounded sort of like backgrounds.
There's a
for
beach
characters.
episode segment of it I saw. I was clicking through a couple. I was like, wait, I don't remember Pekka going to the beach with a girl. What's going on here?
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. There is technically there's two women in the manga. There's Grandma and Demon turns up with a girlfriend.
Demon's girlfriend, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But Dragon has a sort of semi-love interest.
That's what I was like. What's going on here? There's no way Dragon would go to the beach.
He's got no time for that, right?
What the
Like,
heck?
come on.
It's really interesting, and it's the type of thing that like on paper I would be like, this feels like it would be subtracting from one of the things that I really loved about the manga, but it seems to be working really well. I haven't got to the end just yet, but it like I've been really sort of delighted with it, and I like that it feels faithful, but also like doing its own thing in a way that is successful. So yeah, I'd recommend it definitely.
I do like the fact that another sign that Demon is washed up is that he has time for a girlfriend.
Yeah, it's very much a boys' comic for boys, I feel like, in a lot of ways, but it also might just be a competitive comic for people who are competitive. I don't know.
I can talk because this also came up in my research, which is Matsumoto was saying sort of basically at the point at which he was creating Ping Pong, he didn't feel like he knew how to draw women in a way that was as interesting or as effective as he could draw boys. I'm really happy to say that like in later works of his, there are plenty of like really good, really interesting sort of like women in them that he draws very well. But I think that's probably a part of the rationale for this. And I think like, for there being so few non-boys in the manga, I guess the other thing is that like it's something that I really appreciate is that like I know that like table tennis or like, ping pong is a big deal to people that play it, and it as you were saying earlier, Pat, like it's a pretty ubiquitous sport worldwide, right? Like it's like everybody knows how to play it.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty niche as a sport to play at the level that these guys are playing it at. And I really appreciate
like to some degree it's a little silly, just like a little like
100%,
it's not
right. And like I really like that. Is it Demon's girlfriend who's like, oh look, there's like swimming on here as well, and just like somebody that's like clearly just not a normal person. Somebody that is like just has had the good fortune to like live outside of this weird intense bubble that is like suffocating everybody that's inside it.
I've watched a few, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 sports anime, and like I love them. There are very similar themes between all of them about perfection and being the best you can be and that kind of stuff. But what I really like, I was trying to think of what is the most ridiculous sport, quote unquote, that you could do to have the same like framework to work from.
Oh, I've got it. All right, you go first though.
Mine is Foursquare. Foursquare or tetherball. I want those two. Like I think you could have like someone has like a special like technique that they've never seen before. Like, oh my god, he just triple bounced it in that other square. He's out.
Okay, but that's actually like kind of visually dynamic. Pat, I give you.
You need that. You need something.
I give you the croquet manga.
Okay, croquet is pretty good too. But just something like a sport that just like this is not serious, but then it's treated 100% seriously.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's
and
great.
Ping Pong's got that a little bit too. So
yeah.
It's like I've read a little bit of a boxing manga that I started reading after this, and like it's good. Like I fully get it, but I think that you really lose something where it is a sport that's like taken really seriously, sort of worldwide. I think that kind of like actually ends up robbing like quite a lot of the fun of this, which is I mean you've got like Dragon talking to himself like entirely straight-facedly equating like defeat in a table tennis match with death, and like
He's destined to be great at ping pong. It's like, okay,
yeah,
man.
exactly. Like, who
You
cares?
do you. You do you.
It's such like a relief to see him with like hair at the end of the book.
Right?
A little bit, yeah.
Just like, oh, thank God. He's
I didn't
in
know
a
who
better
Demon was
place.
when he showed up. It's like, who is this guy with this girl? Like, he has hair and he looks completely different.
Yeah.
I did also like how, like, outside of our 5 main characters, though, I feel like most of the other people get that. Like,
Just
Demon,
don't care.
the other people on the Neptune team are like, dude, come around sometime. Say hey.
Yeah.
Like, we miss you, bro.
It's so good. Is so I feel like I hope this is I feel like this is sort of implicit from the conversation that we've had, but like did you both like enjoy this? Like, it is.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think
right?
I think I told you. I think I also put in my notes, like, I really wanted to write something about this initially when I read it. So like, for my journey to getting the book is basically Cal gave it to me, is the short version. But like, Cal sent it to me for Christmas, and then I didn't get a chance to read it for a while because stuff was kind of crazy. And we were like selling our house, and like right before we were moving out of our house in Minnesota is when I finally found time to sit down and get through all of it. And I was like, this is really good. I need to write something about this. And then I stopped writing blog posts for like 3 months. So it kind of just like fell off because I was like, oh, I need to reread it before I could write anything about it. And then like Cal was talking about how he had basically recently reread it. And I was like, well, you're coming up on the podcast schedule soon. So I don't know if I'll write something about it at this point. I might still, because chapter 49 is so fucking good. Like, we could talk about it again and be fine. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Both times I've read it, I've really enjoyed it. And I think I got a lot out of it this time too. Just like kind of parsing through pages and looking for some of those big stylistic or like panel pacing swings that we were talking about earlier. Because I think there's a lot of them here, and it's really cool to see an artist do that sort of stuff, especially there's not as much of it in the first half, and I think there's a lot in the back half because there's so much A, intensity to the story, and B, I think like probably energy in the drawing of the story, if that makes sense. Like, at that point you're like hyped to finish it, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that really comes through in especially the Peiko Dragon match, but even in the Peiko Smile match also.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I think my issue with it is I enjoy sports manga and anime for the team. I like the team aspect. I like all the unique characters coming together for like a mission. Like they're
a combination,
yeah, like everyone's supported. Like, it's incredibly wholesome and just makes you feel good. And that's not here as much.
There is a lot of this where it's like kind of making you feel bad, actually.
Yeah,
like,
so
these children are wasting their lives on ping pong and taking it much too seriously.
It's not a healthy way to look at the sport. No, but this had it, but it wasn't, like we were saying, it wasn't throughout. It was building towards that.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate now that I've read the whole thing, but while reading, I was like, where are my supportive boys supporting each other?
I think that is part of why it would have been such a disservice to only do half of it, is because I think that if we'd only done volume 1, it would, like, it leaves you hanging so badly. Volume 1 is basically, it ends with the match where they are doing a team match and Smiles last on purpose so he can just smash all 4 players on the other team, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's such a bad spot to end this story that ultimately isn't about exactly the opposite of that, I feel like.
It's why when I got this for you as a gift, Matt, I sort of made sure to get both
of them, yeah.
both,
Which was a good call.
Yeah, I liked it. I think especially for the art. I think the art is unique, and the way they depict the action is really cool.
Oh god, yeah, it is so good. I'm just sorry. Now I'm looking at page 404, 405, where you've got arms that are just sort of like Pika's arm it's sort of like a U bend. I guess
the flaily arms.
The speed.
The flaily arms didn't work for me.
Oh god, I love the flaily
Matt, what's wrong with you? I also
love
like
it. I
whenever
love it.
people get frustrated, their lines get jagged. Like
Yes.
when Granny's just sick and tired of Peko being dumb, she just
Yeah, those are panels that I was
becomes a
referring to
blur.
in my head as drawn with your left hand panels.
No, I love them because you
No,
can
I
feel the
like those
frustration
too,
coming from those
actually, yeah.
characters. It's like, what are you doing?
How does she look when she's? I really love the little moment where Pico's trying to like work out what Dragon's approach is going to be, and you get like a little glimpse.
That's
into
not
her
going to
in a
work. And
monologue.
she's just like, no.
Oh yeah, and she's just like,
Peko,
your
"Hey,
what are you
brains-
your
doing?
brain's not enough for thinking." That is one of my top lines of dialogue, along with the bit where Dragon shows up at Katase High and says, "Hang on, I'm scrolling up in my notes for the exact quote." Tsukimoto, you might not believe this, but some fish choose to live in brackish ponds. This is their default state, and they remain that way. Fuck all y'all, says Dragon.
See, they're not nice. I want boys supporting boys. They're
Sometimes you just gotta get boys taken down, boys.
Oh god, like it's for as kind of minimalistic as the dialogue is a lot of the time. It's got a lot of just like really, really, really good lines. I really love. I mean, like the entire section where I think it's after Pico's kind of turned it around in his sort of final match with Dragon, and then you get the chapter as Dragon is starting to lose, but like also have the time of his life, and it's what is it? Every cell in my body ecstatic. Go faster, I command them. Go faster. That which can't be seen, sounds that can't be heard. Concentration cutting off the entire outside world, accelerating until all else feels like stillness. He achieves growth rapidly. He achieves rapid growth effortlessly. Mind reacting, body responding instantly. And he pulls away. Gradually, I'm left behind. His superiority is obvious, but I mustn't rush. Play with all my strength. Respond with all my strength. No time to be afraid. There's nothing to fear. I'm like, oh god, I just love it so much. It's just like the moments of like poetry in this, and also like that is obviously against just absolutely wild, absolutely like wild visuals as well. But like I don't know, like there's something really sort of lyrical about the like, particularly the bits where you get inside people's heads. I think like people are rarely that eloquent when they're speaking out loud in this book, which I also like. But yeah, anytime you like jump inside someone's head, I think it is a good time, dialogue-wise, in this book.
I feel like we could probably go for another hour, but we probably shouldn't at the same time. So maybe put a pin in this one, come back to it. Maybe we could have an expanded discussion via text on the blog someday too.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I could just. Can you imagine? You could just go forever if you were just like screenshotting this page and then this page and this panel and this panel. Just like it would be. But I suppose that doesn't work so well for an audio medium.
You almost tempted me into talking about how no one ever tries to just get lucky in this. Everyone always just realizes they're outclassed and is like, "Fuck, I lost."
Yeah.
There's so much like gamesmanship in me to when like I'm playing a sport or when I'm playing like a game or something where I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna make them do something stupid. It never occurs to anyone here. They always just lose. But we're not gonna get into that. We're gonna do recommendations. I'll do mine first because I think I already mentioned both of them, and then we could quickly move on to your guys's. The things that came to mind for me were Dragon Hoops, which is a basketball-focused comic by Jinlun Yang, which does have the pages of breaking down like this is the history of basketball and this is how basketball works. But I think in its own way does a lot of good playing with time and pacing within sports in the same way that this volume does. I think it's a little bit kinder also, Pat, so that might be up for you. It's very much a team comic. And it's also about like Jinlun Yang trying like slowly figuring out that he kind of is into sports and basketball in particular. So that was good. And the other one that came to mind for me just from like teenage nostalgia was Hikaru no Go, which is about a kid who finds a haunted Go board, teams up with a ghost, and then plays Go and like joins a bunch of international tournament stuff, and it's very tense. So those are my recommendations.
How about you, Pat?
Yes, I have recommendations, but again, I haven't read them. I have watched them and enjoyed them, so take that as you will. First one, we already talked about. Haikyuu is probably the most popular sports anime going on right now. Really fun. Really like I was saying, I enjoy a wide cast of characters that you get to know individually, and they have their own like unique quirks, but they all come together for the team. And then you've got all the different teams of the prefecture of Japan or Tokyo that they're in, and they compete against each other, and they have their own like. It's great. IQ, watch it. The main characters, Hinata is a short kid who wants to be an ace, which you need to be tall in volleyball to be able to hit the ball. But this kid wants to do it badly, and he can like jump like nobody's business. And he's paired against Kageyama, who is the smile equivalent. He's the natural talent who doesn't have time for anybody else, but he's opening up because he knows that teamwork is the most important part. IQ, it's great. 45 volumes. I'm sure it's great because the anime is great. Plus, the opening songs in the anime are fantastic. Listen to them; they're fake. They're great. Great. My second recommendation is "Run with the Wind," which, if you can guess from the title, is about track and field. It's about relay marathons. Yeah, so that one's
that's cool. An individual sport, but it's not if it's a relay marathon.
Ha 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 ha! Still teamwork.
Damn it,
that sounds 100% my jam, though. I'm writing that down.
It's really good. Run with the Wind. The manga is 6 volumes, but the story is there's natural talent coming up from high school. What's his name? Kurihara, I think is the whatever. It doesn't matter. It's about this. It's in college, which I appreciate much more than high school. I always feel a little weird being older and watching all these high school kids do stuff. But Run with the Wind is about a university relay team, and it's about this 4th year student who desperately wants to compete in I have it written down. Where is it? Hakone Ekiden, which is a relay marathon between Tokyo and Hakone, which is 135 miles. It's crazy. It's an incredibly challenging relay marathon. And this guy really wants to compete in it, doesn't have a team, so he's tricked this dorm to be part of the track team because he'll pay for the room and board for these kids, for these students. So he's tricked them all to be on the track team, and it's the story of them competing and getting up to speed to compete in this really popular marathon. It's great. It's short too. It's only the anime is only 23 episodes, and like I say, it's only 6 volumes. The manga.
Nice. Okay.
Highly recommend.
Definitely checking that one out.
Yeah, what you got?
A couple, I think. So one of them is Sunny, which is another series by Taiyo Matsumoto. Super different in a lot of respects. It is a sort of semi-autobiographical work about kids growing up in a foster home in Japan in the, I'm going to say 70s. Which is something that Taiyo Matsumoto also experienced in his childhood. And it is, if you sort of take a lot of the kind of like lowest emotional ebbs from Ping Pong and then stretch that out about kids living in a foster home and finding that as hard as you might imagine they would, it's that. But it's also really beautiful and really sort of emotionally well observed. And I think it's a nice contrast to Ping Pong in that it is significantly kind of like lower octane in terms of the things that people are doing, but he still finds all kinds of ways just to make it really visually dazzling, even if it's just kids sitting in a unusable car, sort of talking about the future and sort of imagining what they would do if the car could work. That becomes ecstatic, in terms of the visuals. So that one I'd really, really recommend, but with the sort of slight health warning that it is a bleak series that will make you feel very, 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 very bad for lots of it. So that's would recommend it massively, but with that sort of slight health warning. The other one that I'd recommend is, I think it's the other kind of sports manga that I got into sort of on the back of Ping Pong that I've enjoyed the most, and it's one called Cross Game by Mitsuru Adachi, and it's about baseball, specifically kind of like kids playing baseball, but it is really like about like so much more. The premise of it kind of involves something that I think is sort of like quite a big twist, or like early on the story goes in a direction that you really do not expect, but kind of like it touches on sort of similar themes of kind of like striving for excellence and kind of like what that means, and like if you have potential, like what's your responsibility with that. But sort of beyond that as well, it's just really emotionally rich and sort of is full of like all kinds of just like really fun, like funny characters, and does really interesting fun things with kind of gender as well. It's kind of split between these sort of like male and female sort of protagonists, and kind of like looking at the difficulties that you face if you are a girl who is incredibly good at baseball in Japan in the, I think like the 90s maybe, and there are just fewer opportunities for you compared to sort of male peers who may be sort of just as talented but have kind of places to go. And I think that's really interesting, and sort of maybe it's quite a good counterpoint to Ping Pong, which
I'd say that does sound interesting in contrast to this, where there are none.
And it's got it's a really interesting one, kind of like visually as well. And I'll send I'll send you a screenshot to pop into the show notes if that's okay, because it does like artistically so different to anything that Matsumoto's done, but like there is just kind of, although the kind of like cartoony looks really kind of simple and clean, like there's so much like subtlety going on with it, and there's one bit where there is a character sort of smiling, and it's like the most like imperceptible shift to a smile, but is electrifying to like look at. I think if you were me anyway. So I'll send that to you and see if you have a similar reaction. It would be perfectly reasonable if you don't, but it's I think kind of like emblematic of like what is really exciting about Cross Game as well. So Cross Game and Sunny, I think, are the two that I'd recommend.
Nice. Well, I look forward to that. But I think that is going to do it for our discussion this month of Ping Pong. As always, if you want to get in touch with Pat or myself, you can email us at waitingonthetrade@gmail.com. You can also find more comics-related goodness at mattreadscomics.com. Cal, hiding out at this point, not on the internet.
Yes, 100%. No, it's bad.
You can send us mail if you want to talk to Cal. I'll forward it. Unless it's bad, and then I won't. Thank you so much, Cal, for coming on to talk about this book, though. I really did enjoy it a lot, especially that back half. That back half is just like such a banger. So it was really good to get a chance to talk about it and finally realize my thoughts about it after like a year and a half or something at this point.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Like, thank you so much. It's like, always really, really lovely to speak to you both about comics. And this one in particular is one that, as you may be able to tell, I've probably needed to talk to people about for quite a long time, and so I'm very grateful for you to being part of me actually getting to realise that dream. So yes, thank you.